Good morning and welcome to today's event with Ascelia Pharma. With me today I have the Deputy CEO, Julia Brogren. And topic for today is actually commercialization and partnering, a very interesting topic and also interesting for Ascelia because they're entering into these discussions right now. As always, I would like to welcome the audience, and you are more than welcome to post your questions. And I will forward them during Julia's presentation. And we already received a couple of good questions, so please keep on posting. And as always, we will also record this event and will publish it soon after it's edited. And Ascelia Pharma and Julia will do the same on their side. So by that said, I hope everyone will have a good event. And Julia, welcome to you.
Thank you, Klaus. It's good to be here. I'm looking forward to this session on commercialization and partnering with Ascelia and focus on our lead asset, Orviglance. So I'll be making some forward-looking statements, so please pay attention to this slide. In Ascelia, we are focused on identifying, developing, and commercializing novel drugs that can help people with rare cancer conditions. We have two assets in our pipeline. One is Orviglance. It's in registration phase, meaning that we're preparing for the submission to regulatory authorities. It's a first-in-class diagnostic drug that can help a very specific patient population with a clear unmet need. We have an orphan drug designation for this patient population, and we can address a market potential of $800 million annually, US dollars. And again, we have successfully completed our clinical development and the phase 3 study, and we're now preparing the next steps. This is the product I will focus on today. We also have Oncoral in our pipeline, and that's a phase 2 ready asset to treat solid tumor cancer types. It's a daily formulation of a well-known chemotherapy, irinotecan, and we have a clinical collaboration with Taiho Oncology. We are ready to start a phase 2 study in gastric cancer and have the potential to also expand into other indications. And we're based in Malmö and listed on Nasdaq in Stockholm. So I will focus on Orviglance today and where we are in the next steps, in particular on the commercial and partnering side. To summarize the Orviglance opportunity, we are addressing a well-defined unmet need for liver imaging in cancer patients who also have severely impaired kidney function. I will come back to this. And again, this patient population and this unmet need represents an addressable market of $800 million annually. We have completed the clinical development with 9 studies and very strong data, both in efficacy and safety throughout, including in our pivotal phase 3 study. We have commercial scale manufacturing, and we are now advancing Orviglance into the regulatory filing and approval phase. Our strategy is to commercialize with a partner. So just to go back to the unmet need for Orviglance. So managing cancer in the liver is a cornerstone in cancer care, both because some patients have primary liver cancer, but many other cancer types also develop into cancer in the liver, so metastases. That's, for example, colorectal cancer, where 70% of the patients develop liver metastases, and other cancer types. So making sure that we can detect early and we can treat and we can follow up on these liver metastases is very important across many cancer types and for many patients. The standard of care is to have an MRI, and typically an MRI imaging procedure is done with a contrast agent, which makes the image enhanced or stronger, so it's easier for the doctor to detect these cancer, focal liver lesions, as we call it, cancer in the liver. But for patients who also have severe kidney impairment, there's a risk if they are exposed to these currently available contrast agents, and that's because they're based on a toxic heavy metal gadolinium. And a link was discovered some 15 years ago between these gadolinium contrast agents and in particular a severe side effect called nephrogenic systemic fibrosis. So the regulatory authorities, FDA, put in black box warnings for all these gadolinium contrast agents for this patient population. Now, Orviglance is based on manganese. It is specifically for liver imaging, so it's taken up by the healthy liver cells. And with this, we have the opportunity to become the preferred imaging option for the patients who need liver imaging and have severe kidney impairment. So a well-defined unmet need for a patient population that today will typically receive an unenhanced MRI. And we have completed our clinical development for this indication, and that includes 9 studies with consistent positive efficacy and safety data, and not least our phase 3 data, which we presented early May, where we demonstrated a strong improvement of the visualization of these liver lesions, focal liver lesions, with Orviglance when compared to unenhanced. We met the primary endpoint, and that means that we can now move to the next step, which is the regulatory process. We're focused on the FDA for the next step, and we can use all the progress so far in clinical, non-clinical, and CMC, and that all needs to be prepared in a submission to the FDA. The steps on the way here is that we will first receive the full study report in early Q4 this year from the phase 3 study. That's sort of the details, the drilling down of the headline results. Then it's a standard to have an interaction with the FDA before a submission, so it's a pre-submission meeting, and we will have the conclusions from this pre-submission meeting in Q1 next year. Our plan is then that we can submit the NDA by mid next year, mid-2025. And all the preparations are on track for this timeline.
Julia, if I may just ask a couple of questions here coming from the audience. So it's not only good headline data, it's actually very strong data compared to the primary end target. Can you just very briefly, for newcomers to the case, explain, what was the primary endpoint? I know you didn't receive the full report. We can see here on the slide, you will receive that later this year. But just to summarize with the 3 readers and what you actually got back. Yeah, this one.
Yes, so thank you. The primary endpoint is asking, is the image with Orviglance better than the image with an unenhanced MRI, or with one where you can combine? So the unenhanced versus Orviglance and combined. That's a little detail. But essentially, is the image better with Orviglance than without a contrast agent? The way to test that is that you ask 3 independent readers to look at all the images, and they have to determine whether it's better based on 2 you can say endpoints. One is, what is the delineation, so the border of the lesion, how sharp is that? And then also, what is the contrast difference between the background and the lesion? So so how strong is the difference between the contrast and the lesion on the unenhanced versus with Orviglance? And so that is the endpoint. And to be successful, 2 out of the 3 readers need to agree that both the border and the contrast to the background is better with Orviglance than without. And we succeeded that for all 3 readers, and not least with a very, very high statistical significance, which means if we repeated this study many times, we would receive the same results. So it's very strong data, and absolutely what we could have hoped for in the best possible scenario.
Thanks a lot. And then if you just change to the other slide, just to take another quick. So when you file, when you do your submission next year, does it make sense, because that's a question in the chat as well, does it make sense to do that with a potential partner? You haven't announced anything yet, or doesn't it make sense at all? What is your experience from the industry, Julia?
The objective is to have the optimal label at the fastest possible time. And so we have the background with all the data, the interactions with the FDA, and we're working also very closely with experts in this field to make sure we understand how we get the best possible label. Of course, in the scenario, which is the plan, where we have a partner, it would of course be optimal to involve the partner in this process. But it also depends on the profile of the partner. Some have a strong development background, some are more focused on the commercial arm. So I think it depends a lot on the type of partner and the timing of the partnership. But from where we come from, we have the data and the insights and the experts to help us obtain the optimal label in the fastest possible time.
Yeah, so to address that for the audience, it's not like you don't possess strong in-house competencies to file for this. This is not the case at all. You can do it with or without, and it doesn't really make a big difference. But it's always good, of course, to have good advisors close to you. Isn't that true, Julia?
That is, you're absolutely right. The key is to really understand your data and the input from the FDA, and work with advisors and experts to have a high quality submission and to be prepared for those dialogues with the FDA, and that is what we are doing now. Another thing is to make sure in parallel that the Orviglance is ready for the launch for a partner, and some of these things are part of the submission, you can say. And that's why it's key to us to say that we have commercial scale manufacturing on track, because it can take a long time, and we want to make sure at the time of approval that Orviglance can be launched by a partner.
Yeah, and that's very interesting. I don't know if we're getting back to that later, but to have your own manufacturing and also be able to scale it is really a competitive edge, instead of letting the partner building up and then launch. That would delay the timeline a lot. Isn't that true, Julie?
That is very true. So we are working with third parties who have established and qualified manufacturing sites, obviously. So it's a third party, but we are fully on track. And you're absolutely right. It can take years to switch from one manufacturer to another. And we see that from big pharmas and small pharmas. Delays in manufacturing can impact, as we know, commercial uptake and also a delay a launch. So it's really key for us that we have a fully compliant, high quality, scalable manufacturing for the launch. And we are on track with that.
Thank you. Please carry on.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the commercial opportunity. With Orviglance, we can address an $800 million US market, the global market, and half of this is in the US. As mentioned, this is specifically for this well-defined patient population. They are very vulnerable and they have a clear unmet need. Our strategy is to launch with partners. And if we look a little bit on the background for this strategy, what we want to achieve is to create this revenue stream in the future after launch with a limited investment required from Ascelia. Working with a partner also means that we can leverage their established commercialization capabilities and scale. So it means that we can really maximize the value of the asset or the data and the launch efforts to create this attractive uptake and successful uptake at launch. So what we are working on in 2 tracks on the commercial side is to establish these partnerships or this partnership, and as mentioned, to make sure that Orviglance is ready for this launch, because that is a key part of the value for a partner. So that's the focus areas in parallel with the regulatory work for the NDA submission. So a little bit about how is Orviglance valuable for a partner? Why is this an attractive opportunity? So a couple of things. One is, it is at this point, you could call it a de-risked asset. We have completed development, we have strong efficacy and safety results, and we expect that this leads to the FDA approval based on our dialogue with the FDA and based on the outcomes from our studies. There's a clear high unmet need, and also because these patients are very vulnerable, again back to also the small patient population, the orphan drug designation, there is a high value per patient, and I'll come back to this a little bit. It also means that we have a clear value proposition for all the stakeholders, and decision makers, for the payers, for the physicians, and for the patients. And we have substantive market research and expert advice and input going into this analysis, substantiating the value for these decisions. It's also a fairly focused launch for a partner. So we can see that 75% of the market potential in these vulnerable patients can be found at, for example, 400 hospital groups in the US. So it's a well-defined, you can say, commercial investment that you need to put in to capture most of the market value and opportunity for this launch. So that means we can go into talking about what are the potential partner profiles. So the relevant capabilities in such a partner would be, for example, that it's a hospital product. So they would have what we call a hospital footprint, a commercial team working with the leading hospitals in the US. So that will typically be at least one of their focus areas. But they could come from many therapeutical areas, because this is a product used in radiology, but we know that the doctors taking care of patients with poor kidney function, the nephrologists, but also, of course, the ones treating cancer, oncologists, are also well aware of how contrast agents are used, and all well aware of this patient population and their needs. It could also, that there are many therapeutic areas. It could also be a partner working with we call them specialty pharmas, but really focused on well-defined commercial opportunities, taking them from late-stage development into market. So they're focused on more the sort of the commercialization and not so much the development. Another characteristic of the partner is someone who also appreciates that this is a product with a high value per patient, which means that with the orphan drug designation and so forth, that it's not so much a matter of the number of sales reps you have, but it's about understanding how Orviglance is valuable to the healthcare system, so the payers, and working with key opinion leaders and so forth. So we call that sort of the high value, you could say, orphan drug profile. Another thing a couple of other things that we believe are very important for the success of Orviglance is, of course, that we share the strategy and we share the success. So we want to help this partner, of course, be successful with Orviglance.
So you with this strong back of a value proposition for a partner, you got the data, you got orphan drug designation, you got your production in place, and you can scale it.
Yeah.
But what kind of deal will you look into? I know right now you cannot mention any names. You have outlined here what kind of partners you look into. You cannot name, of course, you cannot mention anything about ongoing discussions. But are you looking for a pure royalty partnership? And of course, it depends on the type of partner you find. Are you looking more into, some milestones that could be sales milestones combined with royalty?
Yeah, a typical partnership in this for this kind of asset would include a future royalty stream, So we get a share of the sales, but also that we receive some payments for the milestones. So that could be the FDA submission, the FDA approval, launch, or a certain volume or value of launch. And it would typically also include an upfront cash payment to us.
Does it change the picture that you actually worked a lot? As you mentioned this launch readiness, and maybe you can elaborate a little on that. I mentioned some of the things before, but one thing you also possess is a very strong key opinion leader community. Does this change, the whole perspective? And could you please dwell a little with the launch readiness, Julia?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely, to your point, the more value we add to the asset, or the more we decrease the risk, whether it's manufacturing readiness, or it's the network with key opinion leaders, which is crucial for a launch, or it's the evidence to support access and reimbursement. All these elements represent value or de-risking the asset that we add, and the more we add, the better, the more we get, you could say, at the end of this deal, and of course, the more we make sure that the launch is successful. So you're right, that is kind of part of the negotiation. Typically, that's why some companies wait with the partnering, because then there's more in return for us. Obviously, when you partner earlier in development, even before phase 3, then of course it's a different kind of deal compared to when you are where we are now. And that's also why having now the phase 3 data in hand has significantly increased, this de-risking, and is a really good starting point for the next steps in talking to potential partners.
Good. So if we look into when you submit, Julia, you have of course different possibilities, but you mentioned for me in a talk we had last week that it's actually FDA who decides whether it's a priority review or standard review. And also we talked a little about you can get a conditional approval, but you have to carry out further studies. Could you elaborate a little on that? There's a couple of questions about that among the listeners today.
So we've talked about priority review, which is an interesting option because the standard review time for the FDA is 10 months when you submit. And if you have a priority review, it takes 6 months. Actually, there was the latest gadolinium product that was approved in a priority review. So in essence, what happens is that the company, so we would decide to request a priority review, and then the FDA will grant this priority review or not. And to really benefit from a priority review, you want to make sure that you're ready to launch. You want to make sure that you're ready to respond to the questions from the FDA in the review process, because of course, otherwise it will still take 10 months. This could be an interesting upside, but I think it's important that as you also said, linking to the orphan drug designation and so forth, one of the advantages of the orphan drug designation is that you have 7 years exclusivity in the market after the day of approval. So at the end of the day, what really impacts is how you make sure to have the optimal uptake from the day of approval. So you say in life science that the first 6 months of your launch determine the lifetime value of the asset, and you can look at a standard market data for launches that of course there are some market access elements, but basically that is a benchmark of the industry. So the key thing is to be ready and to make most of the launch. But there are some opportunities ahead of us, and not least that we still enjoy the benefits of our orphan drug designation, which includes, of course, the design of our clinical program, phase 3 study, and these 7 years exclusivity. So you also mentioned some other things about an accelerated process and some
Then you have to, if you get a conditional approval,
Yeah,
you have to do
it's a little bit, yeah, it's a little bit a different scenario from our situation. Sometimes companies decide to submit, for example, based on phase 2 data, if that is deemed strong enough to start a discussion with the FDA. But then, of course, you carry a risk forward that the FDA will ask for more data, and we know companies, of course, it's not uncommon to do. But we are in a different situation. We have really strong phase 3 data, so we believe we will have a full approval with that data. Typically, it's more like sometimes the FDA wants to see some other types of data, but when you have your approval, you have your approval. It's not uncommon that other companies, but it's typically different labels. With orphan drug designations, we have agreed on what data is required, and that's our expectation, that we have full approval based on that.
There's a question coming in here just about the key opinion leaders. Maybe I can we touch upon it briefly, but I can just read it for you here. So will Ascelia retain responsibilities for key opinion leader identification and engagement to create stronger advocacy for Orviglance?
Right now, we have, I can jump a few slides forward.
Yes,
we have a very strong network. These are some of them, leading experts in the US, and we discuss the data, we discuss the unmet, we will discuss the unmet need, what does the landscape look like for the gadolinium contrast agents and the black box warnings. So we have a strong network. Of course, when a partner comes on board, I expect a partner will want to own this network, but it's key for a partner that we already have these relationships.
Yes, so of course you will maintain it, but you already did this, you can say. So to answer the question, yes, you will be responsible for doing this, and yes, you will also be responsible for maintaining it, and of course with the partner, the potential partner.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Thanks.
I mean, there are some elements now. Of course, we want the data out from our phase 3 study at some point at conferences and so forth. But managing or driving these relationships is part of the commercialization effort. So a partner will expect that they can take over these relationships.
Yes, thanks a lot.
So I skipped a couple of slides, but I think we are also getting towards the end. But I just want to mention, like for the US, for example, we have very strong data supporting this commercial opportunity, and it includes both volume and the value. So in terms of volume, we have looked into real-world data from actual imaging procedures in the market, and we know that our specific label addresses the need of 100,000 abdominal imaging procedures per year. We can even see what hospitals these procedures are performed in and so forth. And that leads to this understanding of also the commercial effort needed. 400 accounts drive most of the market opportunity. We've talked to payers, experts, we've tested the price, and we looked at benchmarks in terms of pricing that we concluding that we can reach a range of $3,000 to $4,500 per dose. Again, this is because it's a small, well-defined patient population with a clear unmet need.
And you do 2 procedures per patient, isn't that true, Julia?
Yeah, exactly. On average, it's around 2 procedures per patient, 2.2 to be precise. Okay. But typically, what happens is if you're screening for liver metastases or liver cancer, you may have 1. But the patients who actually are in a treatment, you can say flow or are undergoing treatment, and you want to follow up, they can have many procedures. And these are very interesting patients because they are vulnerable. They have 1 or more cancer types and severe renal impairment. They can receive between 3 and 6, 7, 8 procedures per year. So there's a high variability and some very vulnerable patients that we can help. So just a few things to mention. We can also see that these patients today in clinical practice receive typically an unenhanced MRI, or sometimes a half-dose MRI. So the unmet need is also sort of reflected in clinical practice. And when we ask physicians presenting them with Orviglance and our intended, you could say, label, they are saying that they are very interested in using Orviglance at approval. So just to mention, of course, we're excited that the work we are doing is well recognized, and as mentioned, we're fully on track with the launch, the NDA preparations, and with making sure a partner is ready for launch. So I just want to round off with our milestones ahead. To repeat these, we have two focus areas. One is to advance Orviglance to approval. So that is to obtain a timely submission and approval of the optimal label for Orviglance. And we have these three milestones on the road: the full study report, early Q4 this year, the conclusions from FDA pre-submission meeting Q1 next year, and then the submission mid next year. And the other focus area is to secure partnering and commercialization readiness for this partner, for this attractive commercial opportunity. And those are progressing according to our plans and progressing well.
Thanks a lot, Julia. So just a final question before we end today's event. Where do you see the biggest risk in terms of your filing, or do you see any risk at all?
I think we have a strong plan. Most importantly, we have completed the clinical program. We have very strong efficacy and safety data, and we have a plan ahead. And then we're working on the partnering. So I think we have a very good understanding of potential risks, and we are managing these proactively, as you do. Mostly it's around us, you could say, assessing what are the potential questions from the FDA. Would they want to see this sub-patient population? Would they want to see the data cut in a different way? And some of these questions can lead to a requirement for us to look back into the data and analyze it in a new way. And sometimes there's a risk for companies, if you haven't predicted these questions, that you can have a delay. But I think we have progressed really well, and we have a solid understanding. As you know, we've also had more time than we wanted to prepare this. So I think we are in a very good place. But those are some of the key elements that you really need to assess what could the questions be, so you avoid that they delay your approval process. So I think we're in a good place. Anyone in the industry is exposed to the same macro risks, but in terms of Orviglance and regulatory process and commercialization, we're in a good place, and we are proactively managing, you could say, our focus areas to make sure we address questions when they come.
Thanks a lot, Julia. Really good presentation. And by that said, I will end today's session. First of all, I will say thank you to all the good questions from the audience. And secondly, of course, Julia, you did a good presentation, and thanks a lot for that. Hope to see you soon. And by that said, enjoy your day. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Enjoy the day. Bye.